All right. Well, let's get started. I know everybody's time is precious, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Aloha and welcome to the first of a two-part webinar series on our fragile but yet very important food, beverage, and ag industry. My name is Dylan Ching. I'm a vice president of operations for TS Restaurants, and I'm also the co-chair along with Kili Govea. He's a GM of Duke's Waikiki of our newly formed HLTA committee focused in the food, beverage, and agriculture sectors. Thank you all for being part of our first official initiative, which is bringing together some of our industry leaders in a talk story to discuss their sectors as well as the current state we're in. Our goal is to set the stage for our second webinar that brings in our local leaders in government and advocates so we can focus on how they play an important role in our industries. And that's going to be coming up next week. So same time and Tuesday of next week. So mark your calendars. I also want to thank everyone who worked so hard in a short time to pull together this event, which includes our panelists, our committee, and the HLTA team. So just a quick overview of our committee and what we're aiming to do. Early in 2020, we started discussing how we could do more to inform, educate, and advocate for our industries, and even more specifically, how we can do that within the visitor industry. We realized that we all have a role to play, but we don't always communicate and have a united voice. We'll not always have the same views or issues to focus on, but we'll all want to support each other better. I think that's clear. Our committee is also working on initiatives such as scholarships, internships, and future social events that will aim to support our communities and our partners. So enough of me talking. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Mufi Hanneman, our president and CEO of HLTA. Who's really the person who put this idea in motion with Kili and I months back to form this committee. And I'm glad he did. So to kick off our event and to introduce our moderator, Mufi, go ahead.
Thank you, Dylan. Aloha, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us in our inaugural session of this committee. I know it's a mouthful to say Restaurant, Food and Beverage and Ag Committee, but it really encompasses everything that we hope to achieve this year. And I can't thank Dylan and Kali for answering the clarion call to co-chair this committee. I've thought about it for a long time, but as you know, with everything in life, you need the right people in the right seats to be able to drive something forward. So very, very grateful to these two gentlemen for taking the lead here. Today is a wonderful way to kick off. Can't think of four more important people that represent various aspects of our economy, various aspects that are directly related to agriculture, and of course the synergism that we have with tourism. So I will leave it to our moderator to introduce them because each of them have a tremendous track record. I was asked recently, hey, all those guys are from Oahu. Where's the neighbor island representation? Well, I have you know, each of these gentlemen also do business on the neighbor islands. First restaurant, Peter Merriman's that I went to was on Hawaii Island. So that's an example of how they see the importance of Hawaii pulling together, especially as we continue to try to strengthen our ag industry. My affinity for agriculture goes way back. I worked for one of the best agriculture visionaries this town has ever had in JWA Dock Buyers with Seabrook and Company, where I was able to traipse around the neighbor islands, understand the important role that they play and the connection, but most importantly, was able to see the transition from agriculture to tourism. So later on, that ag guru became my classmate at Iolani School. Back then, he always wanted to be a farmer. He always talked about being in agriculture. So when he graduated from Iolani, he went on to the University of Redlands, came home, and became chairman and head of his family company, his family farm out in Waimanalo, Nalo Farms. And I can't think of anyone who represents agriculture the way that Dean Okimoto does. Indeed, if he's not the face of agriculture, he's one of the faces of agriculture. It's my pleasure to bring before you today to ensure that we get the best of this discussion. A gentleman that really knows agriculture from A to Z, my good friend, my brother, Dean Okimoto. Dean?
Thank you, Mufi. Oh my goodness, gee. You kind of shocked me then. There was no jokes or anything, needling me or anything. But
This is a serious occasion, my friend.
Hey, Dean, don't cry.
I actually really appreciate you asking me to head this really prestigious panel that we have here today. We have 4 of the leading people in their industries. I'm going to start off by actually introducing Aaron Pennington, who comes to us as he has 20 years of experience in the beverage industry. He is currently the Vice President General Sales Manager at Paradise Beverages. And he's involved in planning, coordinating, and execution of sales for the whole organization and oversees all islands, sales and marketing. So, and he's a local boy, St. Louis High School and UH West Oahu grad. And he's worked over the years in every area of the beverage industry, from budgeting, event planning, customer service, sales, marketing, strategic development, and implementation. So, I want to welcome Aaron Pennington to our panel, and he will be representing the beverage industry. The next person that I have the pleasure of introducing is a good friend of mine for a while, and he is currently the chairman, president, and CEO of HLTA. His name is Russell Hatta. Russell is also another local boy. Comes to us, he's the 3rd generation to run that organization. And I just want you guys to know that I don't know if hopefully all of you guys have been to Chef Zone, because it's a fabulous place to go and shop. And it was generally started off for restaurants to go and pick up items that, they would want to use. And there's a lot of unusual things there that chefs would want to use. I go there personally just to shop also. But, Russell has come up through the industry. His parents own the business, and he has been involved with the business since 1991. And they cater to restaurants and the hotel industry while helping to buying locally grown products and promoting many farmers products from meats to vegetables. So he has been a good friend of agriculture, and he's been personally a good friend to me also. Thank you for participating, Russell. The next person I want to introduce is a young gentleman. I call you young, Taylor, still, because you're much younger than most of us, especially Mufi. But Taylor Kettleman, he was born and raised on the Windward side also, and received a BA in tropical agriculture from the University of Hawaii. Moved on to work for the pineapple industry for several years, including Del Monte Fresh and Maui Pineapple Company. Then came back and actually has a very wide range. His agricultural background is very wide. He also worked for Monsanto, came back to work for Monsanto for a few years, and then moved on finally to where he's at right now, which is since 2015, he's working for Kualoa Ranch, which is a great organization. Talk about diversified ag. They're into aquaculture, regular farming, tourism, all kind of beef. Actually, I go out there sometimes to go buy my steaks because they do have some good steaks out there. Oysters, shrimp, a whole plethora of things. And it's just a beautiful place to go and visit also. But Taylor is in charge of all of the diversified agriculture for Kualoa Ranch. And he also is involved in community in a lot of different ways. He's on the board of the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council, Ag Leadership Foundation, and the Oahu Resource and Development Council. He's president of that one. And also graduated from Ag Leadership and Pacific Century Fellows, which I think that's how Mufi met him, right? Last but not least is our chef and famous chef, actually, Peter Merriman. Peter is one of the culinary pioneers for over 30 years. He is one of 12 original Hawaii regional cuisine chefs, and he's a known local boy. He's a champion of Hawaii farmers and promoting many of their products. Hawaii's farmers, from meats to vegetable to fruits to added value. He is one of the originators of the partnering with farmers to grow the freshest and best of Hawaii's products. And he promotes it in all of his restaurants, which he has a plethora of restaurants that from Big Island to Maui to Oahu and Kauai, actually. The Kauai one, he told me, is still not open, but all the others have different, he's had to do different themes in the different restaurants, but I'll name a few of them. He has Merriman's Kapalua, Merriman's Fish House in Poipu, which is the one that's closed. He has Monkey Pod Kitchen by Merriman in Waimea and Kanapali, and Kolina, Moku's Kitchen in Kaka'ako, and the Beach House is the one that's closed in Poipu. But you know, he has always been one of the champions of agriculture, and I always said that the restaurants are what brought agriculture to the forefront, at least local agriculture. They're the ones that can feature our products and sell it to the tourists and make them see that we do a lot of good work in agriculture. So Peter, along with many of the hotels and visitor industry companies have helped agriculture grow to where I think today there's a reputation of quality and freshness. Now, to go on, we're looking, today we're gonna look at the big picture, which is basically what we wanna do is look at a picture of how all of these different industries, from the visitor industry, hotels, restaurants, agriculture, how we're all interdependent upon each other. Our successes as a whole, as Hawaii, depends on all of us being successful. And I don't think people really realize all of the connections that bring all of these industries together. And that's what we want to point out to everybody, and point out also some of the problems that we have to overcome and some of the issues that, you know, we should bring to the attention of government. And hopefully we can solve some of these issues and at least make our legislators aware more of where we're coming from and how they can help us become more successful in all of our businesses. So without further ado, I think Peter will start off with his part on what the restaurant industry is about today. Peter?
Thanks, Dean. Thanks, Mofi and Dylan, Keli'i, and everybody else. Aloha, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm really honored to be here. I want to make a couple quick comments about something Mofi said, and then kind of what Dean just said there that are kind of interesting. Because Mofi said that he watched ag transfer to tourism. I know he's referring to that's the premier industry in the state, but there's, I think I would define that slightly different. And what Dean said that's related to that was how restaurants have helped ag grow. And I think it's a symbiotic relationship. It goes back and forth both ways. And to Mufi's point, I would say that it was a transition really that's only just started, only just begun 30 years ago, but from large export ag to local domestic consumption ag. And that's really the transition that we're in right now. And that's where we can all grow and benefit from. That's a whole subject on its own, but you can see the interdependence right there when you start talking about the different industries. And then, you know, and as you were talking, I was thinking, you know, this thing started back in March, and it's hard to remember that far back now, but, you know, unemployment benefits weren't available. They closed all our restaurants. So we had farmers that normally supplied us on a regular basis. Well, the market just evaporated, poof, like that, you know. Then we had employees who didn't have food to eat, right? And we didn't have a business to run, but we were able to open a little to-go business for a while. And a lot of, you know how local people are. So many people came to us and they'd give us huge tips, right? And they were giving it to our managers. And so our managers felt like, hey, we don't want to take all this. So what they did is they pulled all those tips and they went to the farmers around Waimea and bought the produce from the farmers and distributed it to our staff who were unemployed and unpaid. And that was super beneficial until the time that unemployment benefits could get working, right? So I think just right there, I think we see in Hawaii how we're so closely connected to each other, right? And there's some, you know, there's some really interesting things that are changing. You know, one of the things they always say, I think Rahm Emanuel invented this saying, but never let a good crisis go to waste, right? So we're in a real good crisis at this moment. So I feel like, you know, what's the opportunity? How are we going to come out of this better than we went into it, right? And as an industry, we got to think about it. You know, I know that a lot of our farmers, the people that I deal with, they're not going broke, but they're making way less money because what happened, they had to pivot from selling specialty items to people like us in our restaurants to selling retail items. And there's not as big a profit margin for them in that position, understandably. But when we return, I think there's a place for large scale farmers such as Mahi Pono here on Maui, which is, you know, people are talking about, to be more the commodity producer, and for the small farmer to ride along on that logistics pipeline that's primed by the big supply of people like Taylor out of Kualoa and Mahi Pono and so forth, and a place for the small farmer to go in and sell high price specialty items that go more to restaurants and not into retail. So that's one direction I'd like to see us as a state come out of this this crisis that we're currently in. And the other thing that it's probably a bit controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway because Dean likes when I'm controversial, is that I really like to see the target tourist in Hawaii to be the high yield tourist. Anybody that's seen, I'm sure Mufi's an expert on these numbers, but we're getting the same amount of dollars from tourists that we were in 1990 today, and we have like 10 times more tourists, right? So that's not good. That's not good for the state in any such way. So I think that when you talk about how you're going to influence government, you want to influence government to focus on things that are high yield tourists. And not only is that good for all of us because there's more money to go around, but you know, it's good for the environment, it's good for the culture. Hawaiian culture has a place in this. It fits really well too to the sophisticated high-end tourist. So you know, I think that's one place we really want to look at as we move out of here. And the last thing I'd like to say, because I'm getting the signal I got to quit, is that you talk about interdependence of our businesses. Well, most restaurants operate somewhere around a 6% profit margin, right? If you will. So if that's true, and it is true, 94 cents of every dollar I take in goes right back out into the community, right? And so that's how we're interdependent. So I think if the government can focus on high yield tourists and supporting the local producers, then we'll be headed in a good direction. So I think I'm over my time limit and I'll be here for questions.
You're fine.
Thanks.
You're fine, Peter. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is from Waihata, and it's Russell Hata. Russell?
Thanks, Dean. That was a nice shift, Peter. So anyway, is the slide up? We're supposed to be, there we go. Next slide, please. So talking about Waihata and food distribution in general, our basic role in the whole scheme of things is to create efficiency in the logistics or supply of goods to the restaurants, hotels, bars, employee feeding, schools, military, et cetera, and we're called a broadline distributor. We sell about 12,000 SKUs and we represent about 675 suppliers. Next. So really, when you look at local farm to table, that Chef Merriman was one of the original guys doing this, the local produce farm does in-house processing and they sell their product directly to the restaurant. It's very efficient in the sense that there's no middleman. The trouble is there's only X amount of restaurants that he can handle. And if you look at a restaurant, they need to get more than just produce, a little bit of everything. Next slide, please. So when you look at that one local produce farmer doing his own in-house farming, can he handle, in this example, 24 different restaurants to supply to? And if you look at from the restaurant's point of view, you have the produce, the cattle, the dairy, the fishing, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide, please. So if you start looking at distribution from that point of view, you're talking about 96 deliveries are going to these restaurants. And this is just to give you an idea, but next slide, please. So when you look at it, the role of the distributor is to create efficiency in the logistics line, getting the product from the source to the user, in this case, the restaurants, hotels, et cetera, et cetera. On the first example on the produce, they're doing their own in-house processing. We can buy it straight from them and do the distribution for them. So they just have one delivery to make and we'll take care of all the restaurants, which we go to on a regular basis. I also put in there third-party processing and packaging. That's what most of these small ag companies need. They need somebody who's going to process their product and package it and efficiently take it to market. And I believe that's where the government needs to get involved big time and help develop processors, whether it's a private partnership or whatever. But these local producers, they need a processing plant. They need the product to be packaged. And then I can step into the middle and take it to the end user. Next, please. I just wanted to touch upon the two different areas of food. Basically, the industry is divided into grocery, retail grocery, the Foodland, Time Star, etc. No more Star anymore, yeah, Safeway, etc. And then on the food service side, the restaurants, hotel, hospitals, etc., etc. And the reason why it's split up in two, when you look at it, the packaging is totally different. Consumer side versus restaurants, big bulk sizes. So the industry, the food industry, divides it into these two areas. And if you look at pre-COVID, the sales are divided pretty much 50-50. 50% of what was produced was going to retail, 50% going to food service. Because of COVID and the shutting down of restaurants, and like Merriman said, they say at one point they were all closed, I believe. It shifted to about 70% grocery and about 30% food service. Next, please. So when you, I was going to explain that Waihata, we do about 95% out of state. We're importing the majority of our food, and there's a lot of reasons for it, but a big piece of it is the local farmers cannot supply us enough. And I'll give you an example. We're working with the biggest ranch in the state. We won't mention their name, but I was supplying I had a distribution agreement with them to do the beef. And I had one local small chain wanted to supply them exclusively. They couldn't supply me. They didn't have enough supply. But anyway, 95% comes from the US. We have about 12,000 SKUs, 675 suppliers, which I mentioned earlier. But the big part is when you're buying from the mainland, you're talking about if it's an East Coast supplier, they got to bring it across to the West Coast by truck. And right now with the storm and everything, can't even get a lot of trucks. Then from there it goes on the ocean. And then from there it comes to us. Next slide, please. So really, when you look at the challenges that was created by COVID and the current weather, there's a major supply shortage. We cannot get product. We get shorted by the manufacturers consistently. And when you look at the produce, the quality that was coming in was terrible. A lot of the farmers closed down on the mainland, and the whole industry was just turned upside down. Product quality, for us to maintain the inventory levels, virtually impossible. Blah, blah, blah. Next slide, please. So when you look at it, we lost over 1.5 million in inventory because of COVID. Just throwing product away, not even enough time to donate it to the charities. We got to have about 14 million in inventory. That's over 60 days. That was at the peak. We brought that way down. But that basically killed us as a distributor on cash flow. And the shortages from the suppliers, the lead time, lack of the inability to get staffing. So when you look at when the government opens, closes, open and closes, it wreaks havoc across the industries, from the hotels, restaurants, bars, and everything, to us middlemen, the distributors, to the suppliers, to the growers, processors, et cetera, et cetera. Next, please. So in summary, basically what I want to say is the COVID created a lot of problems, and we as distributors have huge lead times now. Half the time we can't get the products. Manufacturers cut out SKUs, they got rid of product, they shifted production to the grocery stores. So we get lower quality, we get shorted, just a whole bunch of problems. But when you open up the economy, how does the distributor, when it takes 4 to 6 weeks to get product, supply the restaurants and hotels? Then if we can supply the hotels, for example, how are the tourists going to eat? So this thing has an effect directly across the whole board. As far as trying to create local food sustainability, I always bring this up. 200 years ago, 800,000 Hawaiians in Hawaii were food self-sufficient. Of course, we can never get back to those days, but we sure can improve what we do produce today. But they need government's help. We need basically processing plants, and we need efficient distribution. So with that, as we open up, I urge the restaurants out there, the hotels and everything, to work with your distributors, whether it's us or Paradise Beverage or whoever it is, but work with us to anticipate the usage that's coming up in the future. We're going to be moving to Tier 3 very shortly. I heard this week, in fact, and I believe the pent-up demand is going to create huge sales and demand, and Chef Merriman will be really happy because these restaurants are going to be overloaded. But with that, I want to thank everybody for listening to my story, and Dean, I'll turn it back to you. Can't hear you. You're on mute.
Thank you, Russell. Great presentation. Good slides too. Wow, you worked hard on it.
I took some from other presentations.
Next up, we want to hear from Aaron Pennington, and he'll talk about the beverage industry and how all of this stuff affects him, and how we're all interrelated even with beverages. Aaron?
Thank you, Dean. Appreciate it. And thanks to Keely and Dylan for allowing me to get involved with this committee. Stoked to be on the panel, be able to share some of my experiences and expertise on the beverage industry. So as Dean said, I got 20 years in the beverage industry. And I've had the privilege of actually living and managing one of the beverage distribution branches on the neighbor island, specifically Maui. As I built my career and moved through different positions, I'm counting them. I need two hands now, 11 different positions within the beverage industry. I took bits and pieces and chunks of experience along with me. And I think a lot of similarities with Russell within our distribution business. But I think one key difference is we're regulated by a 3-tier system. So we need to have, we can't just go to any establishment and sell our liquor or beer. You need to have a liquor license in order for us to be able to sell to you. So you have the manufacturer, which we have some of our local brewers here represented on the call, and then the distributor, which is myself, and then the retailer, which is the either restaurant or supermarket or club store, what have you. And so I think, the framework of our company is basically servicing and providing the structure to service our retailers efficiently, to provide them with the needs. I know here in Hawaii, square footage is at an all-time premium. So, some of the things, Russell, that you had mentioned there, just on the delivery side, we took a look at how could we best position ourselves with different channels, different segments within our within the framework, whether it's restaurants or supermarkets, to be able to efficiently service them, give them delivery frequencies they need in order to be successful, but minimize costs and really partner up. And I think that's really important in our business. Is a lot of what we do with our retailers, not we, just the beverage industry, but all of us. We find commonalities and we find partnerships to really be able to, drive increase in sales or, different new ideas, bringing those to the forefront to be able to interest consumers to be able to either come back or go and patronize one of our accounts. We spent a lot of time in 2020, not only trying to figure out what COVID was going to do, but also kind of we did a couple of different reorganizations within our business that again allowed us to consistently service our customers. We work tirelessly with our supplier networks to provide valuable information and vice versa, to have strategic plans and planning for 1-year plans, 3-year plans, and 5-year plans on what we could do as distributor partners to really help penetrate the different markets that we have direct access to. And I think, with that being said, we have we have over 50 suppliers between our beer, liquor, and non-alc, and we've got somewhere in the upwards of about 3,200 SKUs. But really looking at, how do we scale, and how do we use our scale as Paradise Beverages to really help the local economies, whether it's through our local brewers, and helping them increase their sales, so they're able to then increase their purchases from local farmers, etc. And I think a big thing for us, the way we look at it, when we're looking at our total industry, we left 2019 on a high, and I think for all of us here on the call, we had great expectations for what was going to come of 2020, and then this thing called COVID-19 threw us for a curveball and made us pivot into what we needed to do to survive, right? So I think, when you're taking a look at, just our business and when we're looking at licensed accounts, unemployment was really low to end year-end 2019. Our total account base was about 2,200, broken out between on and off premise. So on premise is like your bars, restaurants, hotels. We had about 1,300 there. And then your off premise, which is like your supermarkets, convenience stores, we had about 900 accounts there. Total industry, we were looking at just beer. We were looking at about a 14 million case industry. And then, March, or beginning part of 2020, we started hearing about COVID and, what it could potentially do, we ended, 2020 in double digits in unemployment. Our total account base dropped by 16%. And again, like I mentioned before, we have our 3-tier system. So you actually have to have a liquor license. And so the numbers that I'm giving you here are liquor license accounts, whether they've permanently closed or temporarily closed, down 16%, with the majority of the hit coming from our on-premise business. So a lot of our restaurants and hotels, right? So 305 accounts have actually either permanently closed or temporarily closed at the end of 2020, which represents about 23%. So we still had we still had some account closures in the off-premise, but it was dealt to tourism, right? So I think those were some of the things that we had to consider. But I think moving forward, the interdependence and amongst the different industries here, I think for us, as we move forward, it seems like the numbers are kind of working out in our favor. We'll see what that looks like here, but we got to continue to stay close, work with the individual retail accounts to see what works for them and share ideas and best practices on what could potentially bring the business back. And I think, we're really excited to get a lot of the accounts back, here in the next couple of weeks or months, what have you. But that's kind of my deal with on the beverage distribution side.
Thanks, Aaron. Next up is Taylor Kellerman from Kualoa Ranch and heading all the diversified ag at Kualoa. Taylor?
Aloha, everyone. Thanks very much for having me on. I'm humbled to be here with all of you folks and getting a chance to kind of speak about the industry that spent so much time in. I think the thing that a lot of people know already is, many of our farmers rely on tourism, hotels, restaurants, and farmers markets as their primary source of revenue. But I think what is kind of not talked about as much is the fact that when you're trying to produce a consistent crop, kind of like Russell was talking about, when you're trying to meet that consistency that you can make it into market with, that requires a pipeline approach. And that pipeline approach in many crops and livestock can be months and even years. So if you look at it as an analogy, as a big ship, when COVID hit and all of that changed, it's not as though you can just turn right, make a 180, So people found themselves in situations where they were struggling to find new markets. Compounding that issue is that a lot of producers typically are outfitted for a certain customer type, whether it be logistics, packaging, et cetera. So therefore a pivot would incur both time and capital, which, as we know, in the last year is something that is not necessarily an option for a lot of people. So what ended up happening, according to the Hawaii Farm Bureau, as far as statistics go, is there's an estimated 40 to 60% decline in Hawaii's food production industry. What that basically relative to everything else comes out to is that for local food producers alone, the average loss is about 2 million per week. What I think is also lesser talked about, but is important because as an industry, we are a whole unit, is people like the floral industry were impacted even more. I mean, they're looking at almost an 80% loss in their sales. And you're looking at an average of about $1.5 million. The thing that we found here at Kualoa, and I think that, has become apparent, particularly in the last few months, is there is a silver lining to all the impacts and all the negative press that we've gotten, which is there's been a major and very definite increase in local appreciation and consumption for locally grown food. And I think a lot of it came down to the points that Russell was making about not being able to stock shelves, not getting produce. People turned to their local farmers. And so there was an opportunity. The reality, though, in all honesty, is that agriculture is a precarious economy by itself, with a singular approach, just producing a raw commodity and, having this mentality that you're going to be able to support a family, send your kids to college. It's a tough go if that's all you do is just farm, just ranch. So a lot of producers have found ways to diversify their economies through things like value add or vertical integration, agritourism, which we do here at Kualoa, and even education. And, that's something that, obviously I work for Kualoa, so I have a vested interest in this, but I really do in my heart feel very passionate about the fact that there is a marriage of ag and tourism and lodging and restaurant industry, kind of like Peter talked about. The STA, or the Sustainable Tourism Association of Hawaii, has a concept of travel pono, and it has a lot to do with that high value tourists that Peter was discussing earlier, where you're increasing visitor dollars through value over volume. And I think that by incorporating local ingredients, by even incorporating things like farm tours, that experience portion of it, that creates a platform for that elevated price point. So there's a really good synergy that can happen between the two industries, because quite frankly, when you look at the sensory portion of a visit, when I look back at, the vacations that I loved the most when I was a kid, you have those indelible memories. You have those things that stuck with you, the smells, the tastes, the feels, all of that can be totally enhanced by agriculture. And we all remember the restaurant, we got to order our first such and such, the hotel, we got to go swim in the pool with the, other kids you met. So I really do think that there is that way to kind of make all of our businesses coexist in that sense. I think when you're looking at incorporating farm tours, I think that this is logistically challenging, particularly for the Waikiki folks. But if you can figure out a way to do this, it has kind of almost impact investment kind of quality when you look at our local food producers. Restaurants tend to have a higher price point, like Peter was saying, and hotels and restaurants are key in creating value to the Hawaii brand. I think that that's something that you got to think about, because when farmers look at their economy and how they're going to essentially be economically viable, if you can allow this to happen and you have a producer that can increase their portfolio where these higher price points can indirectly subsidize what their business is doing, there's an opportunity for good food sustainability. One could almost, look at it as kind of a cohesive manner in which all of us can exist at the same time, but we can build better business. Last thing I kind of wanted to talk about too was just simply that, new generations are looking to have a positive impact. We've all heard about, oh, I want to know how I'm contributing to the community. I want to know how I'm being environmentally friendly. A lot of hotels and lodging are looking for that Malama initiative. And I think that, when you pair that with agriculture, and you pair that with the ability for them to get out on the land and see where the things are being grown that they might consume later at the restaurant on site, there's a huge opportunity there as well. Peter also mentioned, I promise we didn't co-manufacture presentations, but he just had so many things that kind of touched on mine as well, that, never let a good, I think it was never let a good thing go to waste. In other words, I think that COVID created disruption that has allowed us to have an opportunity to pull back and evaluate and foster action. Russell talked about talking with our legislators and getting those packing plants up for these farmers. I think this is an opportunity that doesn't come around very often. I've even heard it likened to once, the last time we had this type of disruption was World War II. So let's not, pull back, and let's really make sure that we can carry forward and use this opportunity to do the best thing we can. And I do agree that, food sustainability is going to take a village. It's not just look at the farm and say, grow more. It's going to take all of the auxiliary businesses, the finances, the land managers, the hotels, the industry, all of the distribution. It really is a complete package of initiative if we're going to make it. So I really appreciate your time. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. I'm going to pivot because you guys actually answered pretty much the first question I was going to ask about interdependence among industries. But what I think the public might want to know about is more the issues that you guys might see on how we reopen to the visitor industry for bringing more visitors in, because, no matter what, no matter how bad it is, if we don't bring in the visitors, all of our industries are going to be impacted in a great way. And I know I saw Peter already raise his hand, and actually, Peter, this question came from because you told me something that I think is very important. So Peter, please.
So, I'm not an expert in this field. I'm not a scientist or an environmental epidemiologist or anything, but CO2 monitoring can, it's an ersatz check for how much virus is in a room. And in a simple form, the way I understand it, that out in the environment, outdoors, there's like 400 parts of CO2 per million. And in rooms vary for a lot of different factors, but you get like 700 parts per million is still very, very safe. And you can buy these from Amazon. They're individual CO2 monitors, right? And so you can essentially people are going to start carrying their own monitors and deciding if they're safe or not to go into. So with that, I say, let's take that one step further. Let's encourage the government to say, hey, all restaurants are not the same. You know, an outdoor restaurant obviously can have different distancing requirements than an indoor restaurant. An indoor restaurant with an excellent HVAC system and HEPA air filters can have even better distancing than one that doesn't have that. And then it can go all down the line. I mean, obviously in Hawaii, we have many indoor restaurants which have everything opens up. So the airflow through them is very safe. So what I'm saying is that let's take some of the money the government spends currently trying to monitor how we sell alcohol, and let's shift it over so that we can differentiate between the different types of establishments. And the ones that are open should be allowed to open to their maximum capacity, because I think it's not too far. It's next fall or something where we're going to, assuming all the variants are not that bad, where we're going to see quite a few more tourists in Hawaii. And if we have all our restaurants cut at 50% capacity, there's an issue. Where's everybody going to eat, right? So I would really encourage the state government to look into CO2 monitoring as one way of differentiating between various types of establishments to gather in.
Anybody else? Okay, you know what? I'm going to ask a really quick question, because a good friend of mine, Lisa Kim, who just downed her 2 restaurants on Oahu. But Lisa did a survey, and the interesting thing is I didn't think about this until I saw the survey. But in this survey, okay, we open up the malls. Okay, people going in there, they're masking, or they social distancing, those types of things, not happening. And yet the restaurants, bars, hotels, restricting visitors are all, still closed. So what are your guys' opinions on, like, I mean, is the government, should the government be tasked with penalizing the ones who don't follow the rules, or just shut down businesses like they have right now? What are you guys' thoughts? And just chime in whenever.
Dean Russell, yeah?
Yeah.
In my opinion, we have to learn how to live with COVID. And to me, the more the government interferes, the worse it's going to be. But let the consumer decide where's safe, what's not safe, etc. But we really got to open everything up and learn how to live this thing, and obviously be safe, wear the mask as much as possible, social distance. But like Peter was saying, the way the government is doing it, one size fits all, and that's not the way it is. He has open air restaurants, but yet same restrictions as everybody else. That doesn't make sense.
Thank you.
I would say, Dean, that it's just a mindset for government to change from, instead of trying to tell us what we cannot do, try to tell us what we can do.
Yeah.
Right? And how can we safely start to feed people and lodge people and take them on experiences?
They're going to say, you know what, you folks can stay home. Don't go out.
Okay, you know what? We've only got like 5-6 minutes left. So I want to open up for question and answers. So is there a question out there from anybody for any of the panelists?
Here's one, Dean.
Yeah.
How do we change the demographics of the visitors if we can't control airlift?
Okay. Byron, I know Byron. So what do you mean control airlift? Or does anybody know what he means?
Number of seats.
How many
Why?
seats are available?
Oh, okay. Okay. Anybody want to
While we wait for Byron to clarify, here's another question. When do you anticipate tourism levels to finally resume the levels we saw before COVID?
Okay, anybody want to take that on?
I can take that on, and it goes back to research that was done tail end of last year by UHERO, the University of Hawaii Economic Research Organization, and they don't anticipate it coming back to pre-COVID levels for another 3 to 5 years. That's what they published as a forecast. That's about all the data I have. I don't have
Well,
that will tell us exactly.
Here's another question. Do we really want it to come back to that point? Because that was
good point.
Right? I mean, if we're gonna pivot here, like Peter would like to see a higher end clientele coming in, visitors, right? And we should tailor our stories to that. How does that work? I mean, in all of this, we have to start thinking that the costs are going to start increasing because, I'll give you a good example for agriculture. I mean, people don't know this, but for agriculture to grow going forward I think in about 2 more years, all farmers have to be food safety certified. The cost of food safety certification for a farm we're talking $10,000 to $20,000 a year. Okay, one. So a small farmer that has a 2-acre farm is not going to survive doing that. They gotta band together, one, to be able to do this or grow bigger farms. So these are some of the issues that the government is not stepping forward and looking at and seeing that it's a problem. So you want sustainability? Hey, you better start looking at giving money to the farmers to do the food safety protocols, because no hotel and pretty soon no restaurant is going to buy that product. Am I right, Taylor?
No, I would completely agree with that. And I think the gorilla in the room is that there's 2 things. The reality is that I think for true food sustainability to increase in the state of Hawaii, there has to be some sort of subsidy. And I don't mean subsidy in the format that we know is like soybean and corn and things like that. There are things such as productive subsidies, which are where you're going to be spending the money anyways as a government, but you funnel it through local and producers on island, things like food banks and things where there's a directive already. I realize that's a very small caveat that may not be occurring at the frequency we need. However, we have to look at it as a collective approach, and the cost has to be shared. And I think the way that you're looking at how do you have that high yield tourist, as Peter put, if I may be so bold, I think the gorilla in the room is you have to do it through value. Because if you're looking at just simple volume and a small margin, that's where you get yourself in trouble. Where if you're looking at value, which goes along with it a higher margin, which I think is the sensitive subject matter that's hard to talk about, that's how it's achieved. But again, this is a ship that's sailed for quite some time, and I don't think that the direction change is going to come quickly. It's got to start slowly and then kind of progress from there. But I think what the problem is, it's coupled with a sensitive subject matter.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, okay, one of our major problems, I think, as far as agriculture is concerned, and I'll tell you what, the hotel and the restaurants and the visitor industry really helps the farmers with this is branding. Farmers don't know how to brand, okay? They don't know how good their products are most of the time. So they, you know, when Chef Peter goes out there and says, you know, this tomato is fabulous. I mean, you know, it plays and it builds that brand. Russell even puts up pictures in his store and of the farmers and shows them growing out in the field and stuff like that. I mean, it brands that farm to where, hey, you know what, that product is better. It's grown locally and it's really good because they're promoting it. You know, those are the kinds of things that, you know, most farmers don't understand, I think. Kulo does a good job with it. Whole Farms does a good job with it, you know, but it's very limited. And I don't know if the general public even understands that. I mean, you see local products at stores and things, but how many of these local products can you identify or even say where they're from, right? A lot of them, you know, that kai choy or bok choy and that thing says local, but where's it from? I think this is the education kind of thing that needs to happen. Peter?
And we're running out of time. I thought I would try to attempt to answer the question earlier about the airlift, number of seats available. And how, if you got all these seats coming in here, the airlines are discounting, what do you do, right? And I think that's a super valid question. Wow. And my approach, I don't know anything about law, but I would look for a landing tax at our airports when you're flying in, and just raise the price of a ticket. And then the second thing I would do is I would go after the less traditional places where people stay. I mean, people staying in B&Bs does not provide jobs in high yield tourists. And and then I read a story in the Washington Post 2 weeks ago about people that are now renting camper vans and driving around Maui. And I just think, you know, you can use tax policy, all sorts of different ways to at least mitigate the effects of those, because I think our traditional model is actually pretty good, where the tourist stays in a hotel mostly and, you know, goes out and does really high-end experience that has great food from great farmers, can go to see great cultural experiences, get a really unique experience that the sophisticated traveler of the 21st century isn't looking for the same old stuff. They want that really exceptional experience. We are absolutely perfectly positioned to provide it. It's just going to take some leadership to help define how to do it. And all these parts play together that make that high yield tourists really want to come here. I think demand is not a problem for Hawaii. Like somebody mentioned, hepped up demand. There's going to be so many people trying to come here, and then next year it's going to be crazy once it's a little more free. So
yeah, I just read another question from about doing value-added products for things, and you know, the thing is you know, doing frozen fries, for example, for maiponos, potatoes and things like that. The thing is what people don't understand is all of these things take processing. We do not have the processing facilities to do a lot of these things. And that's where government has to become involved, where they have to fund these things, because these facilities cost millions of dollars at the end of the day. And, you know, it's either somebody like that's rich that will invest in it, or the government has to help. Anyway, I think we're out of time. I don't know what, Jason, can we?
Yeah, we have, thank you, Dean, for moderating. We have some closing remarks from Mufi and Dylan before we close out the session here. Thank you. Go ahead, Mufi.
Well, I want to thank all our panelists. I think they were able to share the mana'o in a way that I think either enhance your understanding of what they're involved with, the challenges that they see in front of us, and they even offered some solutions and recommendations. Going back to what Peter had said initially about Rahm Emanuel and I'm paraphrasing something about not letting a good crisis go to waste. I like to hearken back to the adage that's been used several times in the past, is that every crisis presents an opportunity. And that's what we have right here. That's why panels like this are very important, because I don't think anybody knows or feels that the community will accept 10 million plus visitors the way that we have been doing it in the past. Now, does that mean that we diversify away from tourism? Does that mean that we find another industry? It ain't going to happen overnight. I have been involved with every economic diversification effort back to the 70s to where we are today. It always falls back to tourism. So a lot of words have been used today to describe the interrelationship, the interdependence. I like to use the word synergism. And that's the synergism that we can have with agriculture, in all facets of agriculture, to rebrand tourism. And it's something that everybody feels good about in Hawaii because of the products that we grow here. Certainly the success stories that we have seen of people that have come in the industry and have taken various components, various jobs and the like. That's the opportunity that is in front of us. And I really believe that's what we have in front of us, the synergistic relationship. To simplified ag tourism is more than that. I remember when one of the people that the governor had tasked to do an economic revitalization strategy for him very early on in 2020, he was surprised when Brian of the Hawaii Farm Bureau said the volume of business that is done with the farmers, with the hotels, with the restaurants in this community. They had no idea. So this is what we need to do. Going back to what was said earlier too about getting a high yield tourist here, it's going to happen because it's going to be more expensive to travel anyway. And we're not talking about sacrificing our health and safety standards, but what government has to do now to get us back on the recovery more than ever is strike that right balance between strict health and safety protocols and economic recovery. Right now, it's sort of going the other way. You know, there's no guarantee in life. Even when you get a flu shot, the efficacy rate is a little over 50%. We have to learn to manage it. We have to learn to deal with this crisis. And most of all, we've got to put people back to work. So I want to thank all our panelists today for the sacrifices that you've been making, the hardships that you've been encountering to keep this economy going and giving people hope. And very, very happy that you are all here today to share your manao. Dylan?
Thank you, Mufi. Thank you, Jason, Dean, the panelists. I really appreciate you all getting together for this. It was it was a lot in the making to get here, and it feels good to kind of get the first one under our belt. I hope all the people that tuned in appreciated what we were able to provide. We'll keep getting better as we go forward. It was special for me to be able to listen to some people that I grew up, idolizing, like Peter, and have some, people that I also grew up with, like Aaron playing football, at Aloha Stadium. So it's pretty cool to all be here in this one place. So I want to thank everybody, and I just really want to remind everybody that a lot of what we talked about was, how government worked in this, and that sort of moves us into what we're doing next Tuesday. At the same time is where we bring in more of the lawmaker aspect of it, maybe people from that sector, so that we can take what we talked about today and kind of see how it applies to things like processing plants and funding and subsidizing. So I really hope everybody can get that on their calendars and come join us again for another good hour next week, Tuesday. I think it's still free for you to join in. Please tell people within your business and friends, because the more the better. So thank you. We took a little bit more of your time, but we really appreciate it. And everybody have a great, safe day. Aloha.
Wow.
Thank you.